Joining us now, co-founder and CEO of the group All In Together, Lauren Leader, and member of the New York Times editorial board, Mara Gay. So, Lauren, you have some polls that are interesting pertaining to the abortion debate and voting. I think in terms of protesting outside the homes of justices, I'm personally not comfortable with it, but it is a right.
Well, and the thing is, whether you're comfortable with it or not,
yeah,
like a Harvard boy. All these
you know the law.
Double Harvard boy.
Harvard.
Went to Harvard. You went to Harvard Law.
You'd think they'd cover the First Amendment.
You would think they would. You see, here I am, feeling inadequate all of these years because I went to Southern State schools, and I find out I got a far better education than these Harvard boys that went to Yale and Stanford and don't know the law.
And I think they carry their
Constitution. Harvard and they don't know the law. Let's see, who else do we have? Pompeo is Harvard and West Point. I mean, so many Harvard boys who are populists. I mean, but they don't know the basic law.
Rights for me, but not for thee, I think is how that breaks down. I mean, look, I'm with Mika. I'm not super
That's a Bama quote, by the way. No, that's a Harvard quote, I guess. That's a Harvard quote.
I didn't go to Harvard. I went to Barnard.
Very well.
Well, there you go.
The Lady College.
Okay.
Look. I don't. So you may know I'm a local elected official in New York, in a small town in Westchester County. I've had people show up at my house. It's not a great feeling. Yeah. And when you have people targeting your kids and your family, you know, I personally think it's a line too far. Of course they have the right of assembly and freedom to protest. But, you know, Mika's point about the polls are this. I think there's a real question about how voters are going to turn, and particularly pro-choice voters, are going to turn their rage and their frustration over this leak into action. And generally, you know, we have an issue with this, right? We've seen very depressed interest in turning out for the midterms among voters on the left. In fact, the most motivated voters are Republican women and Republican men. We've seen that in all the polls, including ours, leading up to this recent decision. And then the abortion issue clearly is a motivator. We're seeing that it is much more of a driver to potentially vote among younger voters, among women on the left and abortion supporters. But the basic issue is that we've got an electorate, a coalition that put the Democrats in the majority in the House, the Senate, and the White House in this last election, who are not especially driven to the polls this cycle. And that's going to be a real problem. Younger voters do not see voting as the most important way to exercise their voice on key issues. They don't think it matters as much as they should. That's a problem.
And midterm elections have historically had voters who were older, whiter, more conservative. But I will say, on the abortion issue, Maura, I was surprised even in 2020 in a presidential election, you have somebody like Susan Collins who supported Brett Kavanaugh after being pro-choice for years. And not only that, had a fundraiser with the head of the Federalist Society, really embraced the Federalist Society and that wing of the party. I did not think she was going to survive her election in Maine. She won by 9 points in a state that Biden won. And there's no evidence that the abortion issue had any impact on her race or any other race.
Yeah, and I think, look, there's a really interesting example of this when you look at the energy around organizing for unionizing that has been driven by young voters, the Amazon vote and the Starbucks votes, right? It's so interesting. These are young people who are organizing a lot of this. But then when the polls, the Harvard IOP, other polls, ours, ask, do you think that, you know, do you see voting and elections as critical to progressing social movements? They basically say no. So there's this real disconnect. And younger voters, which were so key in the last two cycles, the question is, do they think their votes matter if they're not seeing the results after the elections immediately that they want? It doesn't work that way. It's a long game, but that's going to be a problem. Don't take their rights away.
Yeah,
and I think what's the
and by the way, that may be the difference there.
Right, and Mara's right. We don't know till election day, but I think we're in uncharted territory because think about it. Since 1968, we've really seen nothing but the expansion of individual rights across a whole bunch of different issues, not just abortion, but even gun rights, LGBT rights across the board. Individual freedom has grown over the last 50 years. That's for the majority of Americans today who are of voting age and beyond. You start taking things away. Look at the case of Obamacare. Americans do not want to lose what they have come to value and believe is part of their day-to-day lives. I think abortion is part of that. Don't take it away. You start taking things away from people, take rights that people take for granted away. I think that motivates around a kind of anger and a rejection of that we've never seen in our lifetime. When Roe falls, there are 39 states that are going to have significant abortion restrictions. The reason is that, to your point, Joe, for the last 40 years, Republicans have focused enormous energy on state legislatures and on local and state elections, which, in fairness, Democrats have not done. And we spend our days traveling the country, teaching civic leadership, teaching people the tools of political influence around the country, low-income women, women from really all backgrounds. They don't appreciate how powerful and important those state and local elections really are. There has never been a time in our lifetime where the state legislatures mattered more, and Democrats have not organized around that. That is absolutely essential. So you talk about going from the march to pick up the phone number. Actually, it's the march to pick up the phone number to call your state legislator, to actually meet them, to figure out who's running. And for activists that are showing up in front of Kavanaugh's house, pick some state ledge candidates in a couple of key states that are, going to be deciding the future of abortion if Roe falls, and invest in supporting those races. Make phone calls there.
Right.
And that's the kind of organizing that ultimately is going to make a difference. Americans think of politics as this faraway thing on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. It's in their backyards. And that's where I think we've lost the narrative, lost the focus.
Very well said. Thank you both.